Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Bava Kamma, pages 24 through 30. 24. Shor hamazik b'reshut hanizak ketzad. What's the status of an animal committing an act of damage on somebody else's property? Nagach, it was goring. Nagach, pushing. Nashach, biting. Ravat, squatting. Ba'at, kicking. B'reshut harabim, and it happens in a public domain. B'sham chatzei nezik. So there's only a half a payment. B'reshut hanizak, however, if it's in the domain of the injured party, Rabbi Tarfon omer nezik shalem. Rabbi Tarfon says you got to pay a full damage. Whereas the sages say no, even there it's also only a half damage, only a chatzei nezik. 25. Amar Rava. Amar Kra, the Torah tells us, "V'chibastem bigdechem yom hashvi," you shall immerse your clothing in the waters of the mikveh on the seventh day. Any impurity which results from contact with a dead body, whether impurity of a person or impurity of an item, is always going to be a 7-day impurity. Unlike other types of impurity which can be rectified with an immersion in the mikveh right away in the same day, become a tvul yom or a ba shemesh, when it comes to tmei met, related to a corpse, it has to be a full 7 days. 26. Adam muad la'olam. A person is always considered muad. A human being is never a tam. We're always considered forewarned about the possibility of causing damage. Now, why should this be so? Because human beings are the highest level of sentient being. We're supposed to know what's going on. And if we cause a problem, we can't say that we didn't know what we were doing. We have control of our own bodies. Now, Bein b'shogeg, bein mezid, bein er ben yashen. This is true whether the person acted deliberately or without intention, whether the person was awake or the person was asleep. Sima es ein chavero, if you blind your fellow's eye, v'shibra es hakelim, where you damage his utensils, nezik shalem, you have to pay a full amount of damages. So this is different from the case of an animal damaging, where at least as far as the tam is concerned, we're only going to pay half. That a person who causes trouble, even if he was asleep, is going to pay a full damage. 27. Ein darkan shel bnei adam mitbonen b'drachim. It's not the way of people to look carefully at the ground in front of them as they're traveling along the way. What is the relevance of this point? Very simply, if you have stuff that's in the public thoroughfare and people are walking, they may trample upon it. They may break stuff that's right there on the sidewalk or on the street. Why? Because they don't know it's there. They're not paying attention. And they don't have an obligation to pay attention to stuff being there. The roads and the public thoroughfares are supposed to be clear of stuff. And if you left stuff there, it's your fault you left it there, not the people who are traversing the public thoroughfare. And this is certainly true. People nowadays are not even looking when they're walking. They're staring at their cell phones as they're walking. So all the more so in ancient times when people didn't have devices that they were obsessing over. So for all these reasons, we're not going to hold people accountable for damage they inflict on movable items that happen to be in the wrong spot in a public place. 28. Nishbara kado reshut harabim. What happens if your jug of water broke in the public space? And then what happened was somebody slipped on the slickness of the thoroughfare, which is now dangerously slick because of the water that you dropped there, or they cut themselves on a shard of pottery from the broken pieces of the jug that you were carrying. You are liable because you shouldn't have left it there. You should have cleaned up your act. You caused a mess in the public space. Don't walk away without cleaning it up. You walked away, somebody got hurt, it's your fault. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, miskaven chayv and miskaven potter. Rabbi Yehuda says, well, let's distinguish between whether you did this deliberately or it was an accident. If it was miskaven, if you wanted to cause to leave behind remnants of danger, then if something bad happens to somebody else, you'll have to pay. But if you had no such intention, it just slipped out of your hands, and you really didn't mean to do anything, then no obligation to pay. 29. Shnei devarim. There are two things. Birashuto shel adam, that are not really in a person's control, that legally it's not theirs. However, asana katuv, the Torah makes it as if kilahen b'shuto, as though they are in your domain. What are these two items? So one item is bor b'reshut harabim, a ditch, a pit in the public domain. What happened here? The public domain is not owned by anyone. If a person takes a spade, a shovel, and digs out some dirt and throws the dirt 20 feet away, and what remains is just a hole in the ground, he doesn't own that hole. Nobody owns that hole. A hole is just a hole. It's just space that used to be occupied by dirt and is now air. And a person could fall in there and get hurt, but there's nothing to own. So the Torah makes it as though the person who dug the pit is the owner of this hole, even though he really owns nothing. Has no rights over it, just has responsibility in case somebody gets hurt there. The other one is Chametz B'Shesha Salamala. Chametz on the eve of Pesach, after 6 hours of the day and into Pesach. Now, what's going on here? The Torah uh, deprives you of your ownership over chametz in the Pesach season. It's not yours. A Jew cannot cannot derive benefit from what was once his chametz on Erev Pesach late in the day and throughout Pesach. However, the Torah also says you can be guilty of owning chametz. So how could that be? If we take away your rights to it, how are you guilty of owning it? The answer is it's not really yours, but the Torah imposes upon you an obligation to get rid of it and to hold you responsible as though you still owned it if you didn't get rid of it. Lamed 30. Let's say you hide a thorn, which is a dangerous item. It could hurt someone, it could prick someone and cut them, and you leave it in the public domain. Or a shard of glass. So, things that are sharp and could cut people, and you put them in the public domain, ostensibly to try to hide it, but it's still exposed and somebody could get hurt. Where you make a fence out of thorns. So now if somebody brushes up against it, they could get hurt. Or your fence that fell into the public domain, and other people got injured. In all these cases, you are liable to pay damages because you did something that you shouldn't have done. Either you left something deliberately as an attempt to hide it, but you left it in a public space where people could get hurt, or you created a hazard by building a barbed wire fence where people could prick themselves and get cut, or you had a rickety fence that fell down that shouldn't have been there. In all these cases, it's your problem, your fault, your liability. Chayav. Everyone have a great week.